Hello, and welcome to ISO Standards for Facility Management series. My name is Jim Whittaker, and I will be presenting this session. A quick note on qualifications and why I'm presenting this session. I am a member of the IFMA Global Standards Committee, past chair of the U.S. Technical Advisory Group, the ISO Technical Committee 267 on Facility Management Standards, convener for the ISO 41001 FM Management System Standard, and participated in the ISO work group for the development of ISO 41012 guidance on strategic sourcing and the development of agreements, which is the topic of this session. In this session, I'd like to do a deeper dive into the FM sourcing process. Everything from aligning service strategies to business strategies, including environmental, social governance, legal, political issues, and considering both internal service provision and external service provision, outsourcing or outtasking. The strategy on service provision in FM is dependent on the outcomes of a preferred sourcing selection described in the standard. And it's different for every organization and organizations across the globe. Different models. If an in-house service delivery model is selected, there may be external procurement of services in a limited fashion to specialized outtask service providers or specialty providers. An organization may also select an internal service provision with some external tasking, or select an external outsourced model where service provider handles most, if not all, of the specialties, sub-vendors, and contractors. The ISO 2012 FM standard on guidance for strategic sourcing and the development agreements was published in 2017. It provides FMs a model and owners a model of how their FM organizations can assess and determine certain FM services should be retained or replaced, or provided by internal or external service provision. Today, it's become an even more important issue considering the rapid changes occurring in facility technology, the rise of data-driven management practices, dynamic service provision, and a new hybrid way of work, all of these leading to more complex, specialized FM requirements that may require external support. Alternatively, organizations may decide to focus on their core mission and obtain operational and facility services from external providers. From the perspective of users, the standard supports the FM organization or owner in establishing expectations, defining what services will or should be delivered, overseeing the management of services, and measuring performance. The purpose of ISO 41012 is to enable organizations to identify and select the most appropriate options for sourcing and delivery of FM. In order to achieve this purpose, the standard provides step-by-step guidance on the overall strategic sourcing process and guidance on how to prepare and implement adequate internal or external agreements. 41012 provides guidance on the types of agreements, development, structure, content of agreements, and clarification of definitions when needed. The standard really does promote a methodology from a strategic level to an operational level with specific examples and checklists to help FM professionals in the procurement, finance, planning support that really contribute significantly to adding value to the organization. ISO 41012 is a sourcing tool. We use it to help align the sourcing strategy with the demand organization's strategic goal. How to choose the best sourcing strategy. It gives us guidance on sourcing and development of agreements for FM, highlighting things like essential elements in the FM sourcing process, facility manager roles and responsibilities in the process, as well as the demand organization and financial roles in the process, and the development processes and structure of typical agreement models and conditions. It promotes a better understanding of the end to end sourcing process. From the perspective of users and FMs, the standard supports the owner or FM organization in establishing expectations, defining what services will be delivered, overseeing the management of the services, and measuring performance. It promotes a better understanding of why ISO FM standards are needed and what has been developed to fill the gap, FM roles and responsibilities, the necessary elements to prepare and implement successful FM service agreements, and how standards support FM organizations in defining service delivery, setting the expectations, service level agreements, and measuring performance to those SLAs. As I mentioned, in order to succeed and deliver the required results, facility managers need to be in close synchronization with the mission, vision, objectives of the core business. It's the role of the FM to provide strategic guidance on the core business, interpreting needs and translating those needs into explicit service demand and requirements. The FM acts on really three main levels: strategic, tactical, and operational. In doing so, at each level, at a strategic level, it's about achieving the objectives of the organization in the long term by means of defining the FM strategy, policy making, and elaborating on guidelines for space and assets, processes, and services. Also initiating risk analysis, looking at mitigation, and providing the direction to adapt to continual changes. And again, defining performance management of policy outcomes. Throughout this session, you'll hear me refer to the FM organization and the demand organization. The demand organization is the entity that has the need and the strategic and the authority to incur costs to have requirements met. Because we deliver FM services differently around the globe and have different service delivery models, we had to come to a consensus agreement on how the FM organization relates to the demand organization. So you hear that throughout this. The objective of these agreements is to define the relationship between the demand organization and the function or the department, the service provider, or the FM organization. We need to create a shared. One of the most important factors in the development of an agreement is to create this common understanding of the services to be delivered and the quality of service provision between the FM service provider, again, whether it's internal or external, and the demand organization that has the need. This is, again, important whether the service provision is provided by internal staff or external service providers. In either event, the demand organization is generally seeking specific factors such as responsiveness, quality of work or services, timely resolution of issues, meeting the expectations and experience on agreed scoping levels or service levels. Both the demand organization and the FM service provider have to have a shared mutual vision and understand the desired outcomes and objectives of the demand organization. Specifically, the service provider should recognize the operational and strategic importance of its own operation to the demand organization. And the demand organization should recognize that it has direct interest in the performance of its service provider. Now I want to take a quick run through the overall FM sourcing process, a bit of a high level from end to end. So we start to look at aligning the sourcing strategy to the mission of the core business. We define strategic goals, looking at identifying and analyzing current and future needs of the demand organization. Then we have to translate those needs into requirements. We need to define performance indicators and service levels. Then we can identify the service delivery options, looking at business case and ROI analyses for internal and external service provision, different sourcing strategies, and what is the preferred sourcing strategy and delivery option, looking at selecting, recommending alternatives, creating RFPs if needed, and defining the SLAs and management service agreements for FM service provision. Finally, into execution of the agreement and following up, monitoring and verifying that the service provider delivers to those needs and identifying gaps in delivery to implement corrective actions. So we'll step through each of these fairly quickly at a high level, looking at key considerations and questions. Starting off with the initial clauses of the standard, looking at the sourcing strategy and context of the core business. The goal of clause 4 to the left of the process is aligning the FM organization and support services with the demand organization and the mission, how to deliver on core business objectives. We need to consider and understand the business context and strategies, align service strategies to the business strategies. And these may vary by industry and markets. If you're a healthcare organization or educational facilities, technology or manufacturing, all have very unique and differing missions that require differing support services from a facility management organization. So we need to understand and ask what your demand organization's tolerance to risk is in each of those cases and aligning on how best to deliver. Once we are aligned with the overall goals and objectives of the core business, we can then look at defining strategic goals and identifying the current needs and future needs and the North Star or where the organization would like to go. Here we need to consider current and future needs and expectations of the demand organization, looking at market trends, looking at the business and industry. Is your demand organization, is your core business in a growing industry, technology, or highly regulated industry like healthcare? Are market demands putting stress on reducing costs? Unique to regional needs as well. We have to understand market trends. Is the business growing, consolidating? It's relevant to a single building or a small campus or a larger portfolio? You need to have a good understanding of your organization's capabilities, service delivery models, and existing service contracts and current performance. From here, once the goals are defined, we can translate those goals into specific requirements. So defining those goals to be achieved, looking at cost, quality, response, performance. So here we need to determine what we actually deliver, when we need to deliver, how often, and to what level of service. We need to be able to identify the success criteria, what drives satisfaction across all those areas for service delivery, and what needs to be provided, in translating those needs into requirements. From here, we take those requirements and we determine the service levels. We have to specify specific criteria and parameters, taking outcomes and defining key performance indicators and targets for each of those, for each core service area in FM to be delivered, and identify service levels, quality levels, response criteria, etc. So we need to ask questions like, do we know the expectations for each service requirement? What are the specific success measures for each job to be done from an FM perspective? Do we know the level of service? Is it a high level of cleaning for a healthcare facility or moderate? Where do we need to look at shaving costs? not sacrificing quality, but matching performance levels to those expected. From there, we identify various service delivery options, look at costs and risk baselines. Here we can conduct market research. Do we have internal capabilities and staffing levels to meet those service needs and demands? Or do we require going to an external market to meet those needs? Are we in a city? Are we in rural areas? Do we have small or large buildings, portfolio, again, across various industries? We need to look at the market. We need to look at our own internal capabilities for management and delivery, as well as what external service provision is available in the market for our specific facilities and unique needs. And this will vary again by market segment, by region. Are you in a global, international organization or a small local FM community? When we look at the service delivery options, we can then create a business case and analyze, looking at the return on investment for the various alternatives. So we need to identify all the external and internal forces driving financial issues, again, looking at growth, consolidation, cost savings, investments in certain areas, investment strategies in the portfolio, and the cost of service delivery. Some of the key questions are internal production costs fully understood by the organization? Do we really know what condition of the facilities are and what direct and indirect costs will be? Do we know the nature, sources, and causes of risk to the delivery of services? All of these considered in the business case tied to those success metrics. From there, we can select the preferred sourcing strategy and delivery option. This can be, again, either internal, external, or a combination of in-house service delivery. Even if there is internal service delivery as the primary solution, there's almost always a requirement for specialty services and contracts. And it might be food service, it may be wellness, it may be specific data centers or unique assets, specialty assets that require specialty maintenance, operation, and delivery. You may have limited resources in FM organization on staff, so require a more comprehensive global FM outsourcing provider that can manage all of those specialty contracts and costs and delivery options and work to drive external cost to a provider so you can focus on core business activities. All of the relevant information needs to be available. We need to understand what's available for decision makers to make those informed decisions. How do you lay out that business case and select the right option? What are the funding sources? What are the budgets? How do we develop evaluation criteria if we're selecting external vendors? Might look at the creation of fees using consultants to help with the development of RFPs and selection of service provision. Then we can get into the actual provision and recommendations. And this is where we consider service provision that's dependent on the outcome of the preferred sourcing strategy. So again, it's tying the service level agreements, the quality to the requirements. Do we have prescriptive requirements or performance-based requirements in the contract that we can then tie into those provisions and contracts in the next step, which is contracting or sourcing, whether it's internal, external provision, and developing the agreements, whether they're internal agreements, service level agreements, or external sourcing contracts. And if it's external, there's a wealth of contracts, that terms and conditions and management agreements that require negotiation, right legal references, financial sign off, etc. So we need to make sure we have the SLAs. Are we adequately defining the scope and the performance measures to ensure that we can measure the delivery to meet those expectations. And again, depending on the size of the portfolio or facility, is it centralized or decentralized, looking at various contracts. Next, as we combine clauses 7, 8, and 9, we look at FM procurement and agreements. And here's where we really flesh out the SLAs, the agreements, look at provision in the agreements, the required contract clauses, and document those performance criteria. Again, aligning with the relationship between the demand organization and the FM provider. You need to consider the extent and accountability of all the subcontracts, whether they're maintained internally or through an outsourced service provider. All of these lead to the right service procurement and FM agreements that we can then move into execution, monitoring, and measuring to see that FM service delivery meets the performance objectives that we've set forward in those agreements. Here are key considerations where we monitor and verify service provider delivery, meeting SLAs, response times, levels of quality, ensuring the right collect, maintained using appropriate technologies, providing the business with appropriate insights and information about performance, and identifying gaps and where we need to implement corrective actions. So we look at and asking internally as an organization, do we have the skills, the performance, looking at benchmarking, peer organizations, and has a method for identifying service gaps and correcting them to been identified and included in the agreement. So this looks at it again, an overall end-to-end sourcing process. There are checklists, there are tips and tools in the appendices of the agreement. That brings us to the end of this session on developing a sourcing strategy for FM. I hope you found it informative. If you have any questions regarding the ISO 41012 sourcing strategy standard, or would like more information about additional sessions, or have interest in getting involved in ISO, please reach out to IFMA via the website or email, and be sure to reference ISO standard shorts. Thank you very much.